All right, so this is a video for my core audience, the die-hard preppers who I know are going to still be up this late at night trying to figure out what the hell's going on in the world. This one's for you guys because all the kiddies have gone to bed, so it's time for a good old-fashioned pocket talk, baby. Tales from the Crypt, prepper style. Now, we need to talk about what we're going to do in the inevitable information blackout that ensues post-nuclear incident. There is going to be an information blackout that occurs after a major nuclear event. Why are we talking about nuclear events? Well, let me put it to you this way. How many people in your circle, and maybe you don't even know this either, how many people in your circle, in your immediate family, your friends, family, coworkers, knew that today, just outside of Moscow, there is an air base, a military base in fact, which was rocked by a drone strike? How many people know that? Now, let me tell you this. A few months ago, that would have been mainstream news. Now, barely even social media talks about something like that. It's become so commonplace. That level of normalization of this intensity of the conflict puts us at a very, very high risk of crossing a Rubicon that we can't walk back. And I do think that there is a 90% chance that we are going to see a war, a major war, whether it is initiated intentionally, whether it's instigated unintentionally or accidentally. Everything is pointing towards that at this point. Now, whether it goes nuclear is unknown, and I don't want to freak people out. That's not the MO of this channel, to freak people out. The MO of this channel is to make people aware of the gravity of this situation. And that simple fact alone, that something that would have been headline news just months ago is not even mentioned anymore, should be concerning to the average thinking person, okay? So we need to talk about what we're going to do to navigate this information blackout, because you know it's coming. I mean, our society is falling apart. Apparently there's more looting in Philly. That's just another sign of the times, okay? But we need to get prepared for how we are going to navigate the misinformation, the disinformation, and the complete lack of information that is going to ensue, not necessarily post-grid down, but post-event. If you guys are old enough, you remember 9/11, and you remember all of the information, the conflicting information that came about throughout that day. And of course, there was narratives that were initially set up right away, right? And we're not going to get into conspiracy land about that. But, you know, we all know that there was a period there where it was very hard to decipher what was true and what wasn't. And if you think that was crazy, imagine that on steroids, but in multiple places happening at the same time. So the first thing you are going to be tasked with is deciphering and sifting through all the disinformation. Because if and when an adversary targets us with a nuclear weapon, it's going to be accompanied by a form of hybrid warfare that is information war. And there is going to be a possibility that an enemy is going to try to subvert the minds of the people here to placate them into complacency so that they don't do anything, or that they maybe do something that is going to be more disruptive to society. Maybe they'll try to freak people out, okay? And this is the problem. There's going to be deep fakes, there's going to be fake news, there's going to be propaganda, there's going to be disinformation, there's going to be that whole thing that ensues. The moment you first hear about it on the news, and then they switch over to the emergency broadcast system, whatever they have in the US now, the emergency alert system, if it's even operational, okay? And even if it is, even if you are able to access the telephone lines, everybody else is going to be doing the same thing. There's just simply not enough bandwidth to facilitate everybody trying to clog up the airwaves at once. So that's out of the question for most parts of the country, not all. There might be some parts of the country where you will still get self-service. Social media, if there's a major nuclear strike, especially in a place where they have the servers, forget about it. It's over. You know, Facebook's over, Twitter's over, YouTube is done, okay? And that might be that, you know, this day and age, I would not put it past our adversaries to see it as strategic to target the servers that all of this stuff exists on. If they even know where it is. I don't even know where they are. Maybe some of it's buried deep in an underground bunker somewhere for all we know, because this is a lot of very useful information. After the shit hits the fan, they're going to want all this information. They're going to want to know everything about everybody, right? When all the records have been destroyed and they're trying to figure out who's who, they'll still want to use Google to figure out who you are when they come across you with their fully hazmat decked out, full auto rifles, and they come across you, some vagabond, just struggling through the wasteland, and they, ask you for your papers on the side of the road type thing. That's coming. If this all goes down, the way I envision it will go down. So how do you decipher that? Well, one of the first things you need to do, obviously, is you need to have a method of information gathering. So that could be even your cell phone. I know it sounds crazy, but cell phones might still work in certain areas. Very likely they're not, and it's very likely that it's only going to be a one-way thing, the government sending you updates on what's going on, and we all know that's not really worth the paper that the money's printed on, right? So I wouldn't put too much stock in that in terms of telling you the truth, because the government's central prerogative is to ensure the continuity of the government's functioning, even if it's at the expense of millions and millions of people, because they're going to tell you and themselves a noble lie so that they can sleep at night. So you can't really put too much stock in that, but don't rule it out. That doesn't mean you completely ignore those things, because there might be some truth to that. It might even just be very cursory information, like where the attack took place, but certainly nothing really beyond that in terms of depth of analysis of what's going on, or direction that you specifically can take. So, cell phone. Number one, everybody's got a cell phone, okay? Number two is going to be some method of acquiring information via analog. So that could be AM, FM radio, shortwave radio. That's going to allow you to get information from states away, possibly even countries away, depending on where you're located. And that's going to be very essential, especially, they might have more information in South America. When all the elites fly down there and abandon us here or descend into their bunkers, maybe that's where there's going to be a lot of information. If you can acquire information through long-range comms in that way, maybe you're a part of a ham radio network, a mesh network of sorts, so amateur radio, ham radio, all types of radio, police scanners, even two-way CB radio. Like, there's going to be a utility for all these things. I think the Cadillac of comms devices is going to be satellite phones, but, it really makes me think about those senators that were given those satellite phones, what was it now, like almost a year ago? It seems, man, time's flying. But they do these things well in advance so that the population can't really put two and two together, because they know what's coming long in advance, I do believe, because I think they've been planning on going to war with Russia for a while. So, and I think, unfortunately, because they don't have the conventional forces, at least it would appear they don't, that means they're relying on nuclear, and that's not good for anybody. But satellite phones. So the problem with satellite phones is a bandwidth issue, again, I presume, depending on, the network and the frequency that you're privy to. Of course, if we're talking about high altitude nuclear weapon detonations, there's a potential there that they're going to take out satellites as well. They could just start shooting down satellites. For all we know, satellites will be targets. But it's not easy to take out a network of satellites like Starlink. Even if you have fancy weapons, it costs a lot of money. There's a lot of Starlink in the sky, and that would cause all kinds of Kessler doomsday problems, Kessler syndrome problems, where one satellite breaks into pieces and all those pieces fly and kill other satellites, and it just cascades into this wave of space junk, and we're trapped on the planet for thousands of years until we can figure out the space junk problem, that sort of thing. That's a possibility, but I still think, if you can afford one, a satellite phone is probably not a bad idea, because the satellites will still work. There is still relay stations, I do believe, with GPS. I don't know how that works with satellite phones, but there's a reason why they give these to senators and high-ranking government officials. Okay, so if you can afford a good satellite phone, you might want to pick one up. Ham radio, you know, we've done videos on that before. I'm by no means an expert. There's plenty of expert channels on there. But don't sleep on AM and FM radio, okay? Because you would be surprised at who and what will be broadcasting just on AM, FM. And it doesn't cost a lot of money if you're strapped for cash right now. You know, the people in Philly, they should be looting places that deal with prepping stuff, but they're still looting Apple iPhone stores. And that's how you know that this thing is ending. Okay, and this is good news for us because we got the jump on things. Unfortunately, you are going to be tasked with providing for your neighbors. And I know that sounds crazy. I know you're thinking to yourself, I'm not putting no mark on my back, but you will. Okay, you will. Because there's going to be power vacuums that arise. You are going to be either tasked with taking a leadership role in your community, or you're going to have to deal with your neighbors. And some people are probably thinking to themselves, wow, just shoot my neighbors. It's not that easy, man. It's not, you know, nothing's that easy, and you don't want to have that on your conscience either. So you have to find a happy medium here. So, I mean, if push comes to shove, if somebody's a threat to you, obviously you have to deploy whatever means are at your disposal to protect you and your family within the means of the law, I must say, as a disclaimer, but in accordance with the law, I should say. But there's more strategic ways to do things because you are going to need people. You are going to need human resources when the shit hits the fan. And people are assets. People are valuable, not necessarily to be exploited, but you're going to have to sleep sometime. You're going to have to know that right when you close your eyes, that the person you put on watch, are they competent enough? Do they have the discernment that you do? Are they going to be able to tell a threat from a false alarm? And if you're putting all your confidence in them while you're sleeping, you're probably not going to sleep. So you need to at least know that your neighbors are satiated. So here's what's going to happen. In the first 3 to 7 days, like let's just say there's a isolated incident somewhere. There's a nuclear incident, and it was not just an isolated terrorist event. It was an adversarial country that detonated a nuclear weapon on our soil, and we've retaliated. So right away, you know that there's a very distinct possibility that this thing goes full-blown mutually assured destruction. You know that that's a possibility, but you don't know, right? Remember, fog of war, fog of SHTF, information blackout, white noise everywhere, probably the absence of social media, just one big nationwide game of telephone. Everybody trying to, you know, communicate to the next person, and by the time you get the message, it's very diluted and completely untrue. So knowing that, you need to prepare for things to get bad immediately. Okay, you need to act as if it's the worst case scenario from the get-go. And that means a few things. And it's for most places, I would venture to say in North America and the West in general, you will be surprised at how long the rule of law holds up. It's not going to be long. It's going to be as long as people have food in their fridges, which on average, I do believe is 3 to 7 days for most people. If you live in the deep inner city and you're one of these skip the dishes types, probably a lot less. So you have around that amount of time before people start getting really, really desperate. But even the people with an IQ over 90 are going to start to realize they're going to see their food dwindling, and they're going to start saying to themselves, I got to get some food, okay? And when that happens, it's going to happen fairly quickly. You're probably going to see a mad dash on the stores relatively quickly, but there may still be an opportunity for you to go out and max out your credit cards. Now that assumes that there hasn't been a full-blown nuclear exchange, there's not an EMP, and all the ATMs and the electronic banking system is down, and you're just screwed because you didn't put any cash away. Yes, cash will still serve a vital function in the early phases because there's a lot of naive people. Look around. Look at the lack of preparedness in our culture, in our society. Those naive people will accept cash for the first little while. They're going to accept cash. So you absolutely have to have a bit of cash on hand. You might be saying, well, I got all my preps. I don't want to go and put myself in harm's way. I agree 100%. If what I'm saying, if you know your community and you know that you're going to be putting yourself in harm's way and it's not worth the risk to go out to Walmart to get some last minute preps, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's just not worth the risk, okay? Especially you have to leave your family at home. unless you have somebody there who knows their way around a firearm and can handle the situation, if it gets bad, you have to make that choice. But I'm saying there might be a small window where you can get those extra provisions that you might need to distribute to your neighbors to keep them off your backs for a while. Because you are going to have to work as a community to prevent whatever power vacuum that emerges and gets filled by someone from that infringing on you. Now, that is going to splinter into one of two groups, if not your own community watch program of sorts. It's going to be excessive rule of law by your local police department. This is why it's so important that you really know your local police, especially if you live in a small town. It's not that hard to figure out who's who, and just get to know these people. Get to know what the chain of command is going to be, because a lot of this stuff might be top down. If there's any chain of command that is still there, and you're going to be answering to those people within your community, be it the mayor or whoever, whatever network of good old boys, you're going to have to try to deal with when the shit hits the fan. Okay, now there's a good chance that depending on your community, that they're not going to have the manpower to exact their authoritarian rule over everybody, because martial law, it's going to be a thing. It's going to be immediate. It's going to be martial law immediately. As soon as that first nuke drops, martial law. But their ability to enforce martial law is another question. So you're going to have all kinds of crazy shit happening when they try to enforce martial law. You're going to have police overstepping their boundaries, and you might say rightly so, but I just envision a situation where police just start shooting at people, and it creates all kinds of chaos, and the people riot against the police. I could see situations like this unfold at local levels. So you're going to have splintering into two general environments: a lawless environment and a green zone totalitarian style martial law environment. And in between are going to be these communities, these little fiefdoms that emerge of people working with each other to police their own neighborhoods. This is going to be a thing. I mean, think about it. In the absence of rule of law, you got gangs going block to block, and there's no police to call. You're going to have to take it upon yourselves and your community to defend your community. That's what's going to happen. Now, the question is it the local law enforcement that is going to take over and assume those responsibilities and just have this draconian style crackdown on anybody who breaks the law, cutting off the hands of people that steal and that sort of thing? It's possible, man. And you might need that level of corporal punishment when the time comes. I mean, when prisons are a luxury. Okay, prisons are a luxury. A lot of our justice system is a luxury. There's not enough jails in the apocalypse. There's not enough people to work in them. How are you going to divide labor when you can't pay people? What are you going to pay them with? I mean, you could pay them with food. Maybe you could pay them with gold, precious metals, but it's going to be a while before that sophisticated level of division of labor, especially if we're talking about full-blown Mad Max arises again. So these are things you have to consider. Another thing you have to consider is, what are you going to do when, the first thing I would probably recommend people do when it happens, and we're going to be doing a more formal video about this. This is kind of just a primer. This is a late night for all the hardcores. The first thing I would do is muster. Okay, so you're going to have to really take an honest look at, okay, who do you really care about? Your extended family, friends, and who do you think is going to be an asset in some way, shape, or form? And you're going to have to get in touch with those people somehow, if possible. If not, hopefully you already had a muster point plan ahead of time in order to deal with the situation. Something that I am certainly not proficient at this point in time, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot. Having a muster point, having a plan. And you're likely going to want to congregate at one of the safest places where everybody's going to have an ample amount of space, where people can hopefully throw as much as they can in the car and connect, because you're going to need people. People are going to be your biggest asset. The more people you have, the better. Remember, we're going back to a tribalistic medieval era, and people are definitely well worth their weight. It's even worth it, I would say, to have people around for you to feed them. Even if they aren't performing any immediate duties, there's always something they can do, most likely. Even if it's just a little old lady, you know, there's probably something she can do, you know, that can be useful to the community. So keep these things in mind. Try to stock up if possible. Max out those credit cards to the nines. Right when you get the first inkling that this is it, try to max them out. If the power's on, you know, rack it up, go over your limit, do whatever you have to do. I know this is not financial advice, but let's just keep it real. Okay, this is your last chance. So you got to do that. Get as much money as you can out of the bank machines, because cash will still be, you know, fool's gold for a while after the shizzy hits the fizzy. It's probably going to be too late for you to acquire any precious metals at this point, because we're talking about a matter of hours at this point before things get buck wild. And because people have 3 to 7 days worth of food, you can bet that after that 3 to 7 day period of time, you know, it's going to be the Hunger Games. It's going to be the Purge. Okay. What other movie is it going to be? Judge Dredd. I don't know. Pick your dystopian movie. So you need to check all those boxes. Make sure you have a muster point. Make sure you have a way to gather information. There's probably other modes of information gathering that I've forgotten about. Other things you'll want to consider are fuel, okay? Try to get as much fuel as you humanly possibly can legally acquire. I don't care if you don't have a barbecue and you don't have anything to power with propane. If that's all you can buy is propane, get propane. You will find a use for it. Even if you don't drive a diesel and that's all that's left at the pumps, which will probably be the case, get some diesel. Load up on diesel. Pour it in anything that they'll allow you to pour it in, and hoard that diesel, because you're probably going to need it to either barter with, or somebody you know, somebody on the block is going to have a diesel, and that's going to come in handy at some point down the road. Butane, isobutane, kerosene, any fuels that you can find that are going to be overlooked by people, get those fuels, especially if it's winter we're talking about. Kerosene will come in very handy. Propane will come in very handy. You're going to need it. Medication. This is going to be a long shot, and if you haven't got your medication through the various means, this is not going to be a pitch video. No affiliate sales or anything in this video. This is just good old-fashioned pocket talk, okay? But we've talked on occasion many different places, and we're going to do a formal video, like I said, where we direct people to where they can go to get these things. You can get prescription medication, a 1-year supply. You can get antibiotics. You're going to need them. You can get all these things. Most medications, chronic medications, your doctor will probably prescribe you, if, you know, judging by the state of the world, and if you have a good rapport with them. But if you can't, if you don't believe you have a good rapport to them, if you're like me and you haven't seen a doctor in probably God knows how many years because you're just too stubborn like that, then there's other services that are out there that we have helped share with the community. Okay, and they're out there. But if you can make a last-minute pharmaceutical run, do it. Okay, if it's safe, do it. Do whatever you can, not just for you. As a prepper, you're probably already squared away. We know you got your 2 years, your 5 years, your 10 years even. But this is the time to start. You know, you're really stocking up for your community now, because you're thinking long term. You know that that's a bridge you're going to have to cross. So you might as well get ready to cross it, okay? How much water do you have on hand? The first thing you do when you hear that a bomb has dropped is, obviously, if you're in the path of the fallout, or you're in the path of, I mean, there's so much to cover here, but you'll have to look at a map. There's numerous maps online that show where, you know, various nuclear targets would be. Primary targets, secondary targets. If you're by the primary targets, then yeah, you need to, I mean, you know, if you're living in North Dakota or wherever they keep those missile silos, I mean, man, that's got to be the worst place to be right now, to be brutally honest. From a strategic relocation point of view, terrible place to be. Then you got to think about the prevailing winds, the jet stream, which is all wacky nowadays. So, you know, it used to be that there was a very consistent winds blowing in certain directions, but not anymore. I mean, now some days the winds are blowing north, south, some days they're blowing east, west, some days they're blowing backwards, it seems. So, yeah, usually they would blow west to east, but nowadays it's just, you know, anything goes. So These are things to consider, right? And so yeah, there might be the need to immediately go and get into the bunker or get into your basement or some kind of makeshift fallout shelter of sorts. You might have to do that. And that means that all of this other stuff I'm talking about is not even an option. But you have to make that judgment call. This is why it's so important that we figure out the information blackout. Is it worth venturing out to the grocery store when there could be other nukes? There could be fallout on the way because you weren't given the memo about, all the other nuclear bombs that are inbound. And so now you're standing out there and you're in the thick of this nuclear fallout cloud, and or worse, a bomb goes off and you're that proximate to it that you are not in your shelter, if you're privy to one. So there's a lot of things to consider here, but I'm just trying to war game and strategize what we're going to do when it hits the fan. Okay, let me just check my time on here. I got 11%. Some guy told me, hey, just plug a USB-C in there. I see you got a Sony, so you can do that. And you know me, it takes me a long time to learn the simplest things. But I am a fast learner when it comes to difficult things. Anyways, so let's talk about the other things that we need. Water, okay? Fill up the bathtub with water. Fill up anything you can with water because you don't know when that water pressure is going to be kaput. Because if the grid isn't functioning, there's a good chance most places don't have the old water towers anymore, and once that water tower runs dry anyways, you're basically without water pressure. So there's that. Try to stock up on as much water as possible, even if you're in a region where water is abundant. You don't want to have to leave your family to go and get water and risk putting them out and doing that day after day after day. It just puts you out there. You don't want to be out there. You might say to yourself, well, it's better that I kind of have a sense of what's going on in the community. This gives me an excuse to go and do that. And it also somewhat would insulate you. And I've made the suggestion before that if there's a bread line outside and it's SHTF, go stand in it. Even if you don't need the bread, just so people don't think that your belly's too full, if you know what I mean. Just not to make yourself a target. It's the gray man thing to do. Anyways, we'll do a video specifically on little gray man ideas that I have with respect to that, because there's a lot there. But food, yeah, make sure you can, if at all possible, if you know or you can intuit with a high degree of certainty that the bombs aren't on their way to you, then go out to the grocery store while things are still relatively calm. Chances are there's going to be a run up to this. It's not just going to be out of nowhere, I don't think, even though it could happen any minute. And what concerns me most about the recent incidents is the lack of publicity. The lack of publicity of the incident that happened in St. Petersburg the other night. Some people were saying in the comment section that, well, that was a storm and it wasn't the result of an explosion, but there were witnesses that seen an explosion, flashes in the sky, 100,000 people without power. I checked the weather in that region. It wasn't that bad that night. There was a little bit of light rain, but it wasn't a storm that would take out an entire power station. So anyways, in light of what's going on, this recent attack on the airbase near Moscow just tonight, no media reported on that. What concerns me is that things are escalating in the background and they're not telling us how bad it's going to get. Whereas, typically in the documentaries, like I just watched one recently called Through the Looking Glass. I hadn't seen it in many years. I would encourage people to go and watch it. Kind of a mockumentary on what it would be like if the bombs started dropping. I think it centers around Strait of Hormuz in Iran. But, there's this run-up. There's this predictable run-up. Okay, Russia shot one of our ships, and then you could see that. So right when we see that, we would know, okay, this is, we're getting really close. I mean, we're getting tangible close. We can smell the nuclear Armageddon on the horizon. Right now, we can kind of see it, and we can almost see a direct pathway to it with what's going on in the Black Sea, because they're going to shoot down a reconnaissance plane. It's inevitable. Or Moscow is going to have to retaliate for these drone strikes deep into its territory. But so we can kind of see the pathway now. It's not hypothetical anymore. It's not fantasy draft. It's real world. So, but it's still, we still have a few more steps. And you would think that you would hear about those steps. But now, because the power of information, you don't know what's going to be minimized. Russian propaganda on that side is not telling their population what's going on. We're not telling our population what's going on entirely. And they're playing all these word games, and they got everybody distracted by the thing. Yeah, the Nazi in Parliament was bad, but I mean, should that be a distraction away from everything else? Come on. Like, should that be the focal point of all of our attention for 2 frickin' days? I know it's a great way to put one over Justin Trudeau and the Liberals there in the office right now in Canada, but that should not be the focal point. That should not take away from everything else that's going on in the world. So, water, okay? So you got to get water, you got to get food, got to get medicine. All of those core elements, you got to understand who you're bringing into your group. What are they going to be like in a stressful situation? Are they people who can manage their nervous system when it gets down to the wire and you are put in high stress situations? Are they going to crap their pants? Are they going to freeze up? Are they going to faint? Are they going to flight? Are they going to fight? These are things to know. Most people, your closest relatives, you don't know how they're going to react in those situations because most people have never been in those life-threatening situations with people that they know, even intimately. So, for that reason, you know, you just have to kind of do your own sort of psychological homework on the people that you know. We recently had Mike Shelby on the channel from Forward Observer. He was talking about the importance of doing an area study. We've done numerous videos on this channel where we just drive around town and we look at some of the points of interest around town that might be relevant in a crap hits the fan situation, okay? So go and watch those videos if I remember, which I won't. I'll post links to them in the description below, but don't worry, because we're going to be doing a formal piece with all the communist camera crew. They're going to put together some nice artsy-fartsy thing, and it's going to be very digestible. It's going to be faster and more to the point than this, even though I know a lot of you old school prepper types, you James Wesley Rawle types, you like it like this. So I figured I would just come on here late at night and share this with you. Let's hope we didn't wake up the kids. But I'm really concerned, my friends, because we are on a collision course. This procession of events towards nuclear Armageddon is becoming more clear by the minute. Let's hope it doesn't go there. But it's looking like that's where it's going to go. Unless somebody just chickens out at the last minute. It could be us. You know, there could be some other major crisis. That's my only hope at this point, is there is another major crisis that comes along. Maybe rogue AI, maybe it's an asteroid, maybe the whole financial system just, you know, collapses. But usually after that comes war anyways, so that wouldn't be good. Maybe we're going to see another virus. Maybe it's going to be, you know, an AI-generated Skynet virus, right? You know, anything could happen. But we almost need something like that that unites humanity towards a common cause and distracts us just temporarily so we can kind of realign ourselves and maybe get different changes of government that might permit, that might foster the groundwork for trust to be built again between nations who completely have lost trust in one another, in spite of what they say. For those of you who stuck around, get a load of this, okay? We got a cool video coming up, man. This is a very, very cool apocalypse weapon. And my main man, Jorge Sprav, sent me something, and I'm going to show you its features, as he would say. It's very cool. It's different than anything I've showed on this channel before. I've shown repeating crossbows. I've shown all kinds of stuff. This thing is different, and it's cool. And if you don't think that you need a string projectile weapon for the apocalypse because you got 50,000 guns in your gun safe, I'm telling you, man, you need either a recurve bow, a compound crossbow, or a recurve crossbow. I would probably go with the recurve crossbow. That's going to be your best bet. You want to do stealth hunting. You don't want to be drawing the attention of all those cannibals because they're going to be out there. Apparently, Philly's getting looted tonight too. That's not surprising at all. That's not surprising at all. All right, guys, take care. Thanks for watching. Have a good sleep.